Welcome to another episode of Frankly Speaking Sports Interviews. And tonight we have a very special guest for you. Tonight it's going to be Peter Burns, the ESPN SEC Network anchor. He joined us live earlier today to discuss SEC football, some basketball. We talked a little bit about baseball, and we talked about his career in broadcasting. So this was a terrific interview we had today, and we want to remind you that all of our interviews, whether they're previous interviews or ones coming up in the future, are on our YouTube channel at Frankly Speaking Sports. We're about to go ahead and start our interview that we had earlier today with Peter. If you have any questions, concerns, or thoughts, you can leave messages as we are going through this interview. All of you, enjoy. Outline is my pleasure to introduce to you ESPN SEC Network studio anchor Peter Burns. Peter, how you doing today?
Larry, I'm good, man. By that intro, you're gonna be putting me out of a job soon, man. You got it down pat. I'm gonna take my broadcasting tips from you going forward.
I appreciate that. Actually, Peter, I was reading something. I think it was yesterday, and I follow you on Twitter. Obviously, you know that, and it was one of the most interesting things, and I'm not a big-time reader, so to get me to read anything is really amazing. And it was about a blog you did 6 years ago. You were basically talking about your career in broadcasting and reporting and stuff like that. Just an amazing piece that I read, and I know a lot of people have read it, and it leads me to my first question, obviously, that I had for you. We have a lot of listeners here that they want to be podcasters. They want to be sports anchors. They want to be sports reporters. Tell them how you personally went about starting your career in the business and about how hard it really was to get where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, there's a traditional, career path of hey, going to school and getting a degree in mass communications or journalism, and then, working for a small television station or a small radio station, kind of building up. And mine was completely opposite of that. I worked in the gas and oil industry right out of school, and, there used to be a guy named Andrew Siciliano, who is one of the big hosts on NFL Network. He was part of a radio show for Fox Sports Radio. And one year they had this American Idol type, send in an audition and you can be a radio show host for a day. So I sent in an audition tape, and lo and behold, I ended up winning this nationwide contest, and I got to go host it in Los Angeles for a day. And after I did that, I was sold, man. I was so excited about trying to do this for a living. And so I went to the local sports station in San Antonio, Texas, where I was living, and I said, hey, man, I'll take any job you have. I don't care what it is. Just get me in the door. And they said, all right, well, we're not going to put you on air because we don't know who you are and if you're any good, but here's a phone book and learn how to sell advertising. And so sure enough, I took any job. I didn't know how to sell advertising, but learned it as best as I could and did that pretty well. And then eventually they ended up giving me a little weekend show that no one listened to, and that progressed and made it into a daily Monday through Friday show, and then that progressed to a national show, and then now I've kind of just lucked out to get to here. It's kind of a fast forward version of it, but it just goes to show you there's no real, it's more being in the right place at the right time as opposed to an actual true roadmap to get to that spot.
Yeah, and like I said, that blog was just amazing. I loved it. It was about 2 months ago. I'm sitting down, and I had just moved to Arkansas. I lived in Florida for 36 years. My wife had gotten a position out here, and I'm sitting down. I'm watching the beginning, and I say beginning because you understand there was no ending of the SEC tournament, and Arkansas is playing Vanderbilt. I'm watching the game, and in the middle of the game, breaking news comes out that the NBA is canceling their season, and then the story that went on after that. Talk about, you follow the SEC. Talk about first the athletes. Not only the experiences that they lost from not being in these tournaments, and but how about all the exposure they lost, and now they'll never have a chance to get that back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the opportunity for a lot of these kids, especially for like Arkansas. Isaiah Joe and Mason Jones and Eric Musselman's team had a lot of talent coming into the year, and they started really kind of catching their stride, especially when Joe got a little bit back healthy, and you wanted to see this team. And it's tough because for a lot of these kids, we think of college athletes as Joe Burrow or Tua Tagovailoa, the all big time stars. Well, guess what? That maybe is 1% of college athletes, maybe 2% are the stars that we know. It's a lot of the kids that are the seventh guy and the bench player for Arkansas, basketball, or for women's hoops. South Carolina might have an equipment manager who just started with the team, but they didn't get a chance to go on a national championship run. So, that's the tough part about it. And I think that's why, athletic directors across the board were so not upset's the wrong word, but just disappointed, because you see how hard these kids in the non-marquee events or at sports work so hard to get to this point, and then now finally, here they are getting ready to play, and it all gets shut down, and it's not because of something the kids did, and I think that's been the brutal part, because you're right, it is a lot of exposure for them, but it's just a life experience. I mean, those kids will always remember playing in a tournament, and now they got kind of robbed of that because of this whole coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, and for a network like the SEC network, this was supposed to be one of the busiest times. You had the tournament starting, the SEC tournament. You're going to have March Madness. You have conferences in baseball beginning to play conference games. I know Arkansas was just about to start theirs. I mean, how much has it affected a network like your network?
Well, I mean, a lot, because, I look at this as like, as much as we do basketball and football really well, I think the best thing we do on our network is baseball and softball, because those are traditionally the sports that don't get a whole lot of love, right? That they don't get, a bunch of notoriety, and we showcase them. So for us, when baseball and softball goes away, that's at least 3 days a week where we would traditionally have live games and people tuning into our network, and us being in studio doing a pregame show or a postgame show. But when you don't have those, all of a sudden everything is stagnant. You're not getting an opportunity to really do what you love to do in those jobs. So it's definitely changed. I mean, I would imagine, I don't know the numbers, but clearly we probably, because we're not doing live games, we're not going to have naturally as many viewers as we would traditionally have. But it also helps us in a way kind of energize our creative minds a little bit more, because traditionally, like, what we do is, hey, we have the baseball season, softball season, and then we go straight into football season again. And we don't have a time to kind of really develop new ideas. This whole pandemic has allowed us to kind of shift our brains to try new creative things. We're doing a show with Laura Rutledge, which is called No Off Season, where we go in-depth interviews with some big stars. We, I did a show with Gus Malzahn where we go, remember when Kick 6 happened? And we look back at some of the big plays, and so it's allowing us, how we just did show and tell with Jimmy Johnson, the NASCAR guy, on Marty and McGee. So in a weird way, it's opened our minds of what more creative things we can do with the network, as opposed to just showing ball games.
Now, the biggest question, not just relating to the SEC, but the entire college football world, is whether there is going to be a season or not. But looking at the SEC, especially here in Arkansas, we heard Hunter Yurachek, the athletic director, come out and said, we're doing business as usual. We plan on the guys reporting in June, and we plan on playing our home opener on September 5th. What's the latest you hear out of the college football? Let's talk about the SEC anyway, as far as college football.
Yeah, I mean, for the SEC right now, and in fact, it was just released, on Friday, is that they're going to be returning to be back on campus for students. I believe June the 8th. I believe that was the what they had allowed or permitting athletic activities to begin June 8th. And so what that does is that still gives you about 6 to 8 weeks to get these kids ready if they do indeed have a season. So I think what's going to end up happening is that kids are going to go back on campus here on June 8th. Obviously, everyone's going to be really careful. And I think they're going to monitor how it goes. And as long as there's not super major issues, then I think we will have college football as scheduled in September. The only issue is that I don't believe that we will have, 80,000 people over in Fayetteville for a football game. I think it's going to take a while for us to kind of ease back into having bigger and bigger stadiums and bigger crowds. But at least for us, I would take some football is better than no football.
Yep, definitely. Now, let me ask you, obviously, LSU, they won the national championship last year. They lost a lot of players this year, as well as their offensive coordinator. Do you think they still have a legitimate shot to repeat? And who do you think, if anyone, I mean, obviously Alabama, but besides that can actually challenge them?
Yeah, I think LSU is actually in a really good situation because they had a lot of young guys play as well, even though they lost a bunch of guys to the NFL. And I love this kid, Miles Brennan. Miles Brennan is a kid that's been on the LSU quarterback. Has been on campus for about 4 years now, so it's not as if, hey, you're breaking some new kid in. But they did lose, their pass game coordinator, Joe Brady. They end up losing Dave Aranda, their defensive coordinator, who goes out to Baylor to be a head coach. So they are losing a lot of pieces. I personally think that, in a weird way, it's the East that I think is a little bit stronger this year. That I think it actually ends up being Florida and Georgia that are probably the two best teams in the conference. Then I think you have LSU, Alabama, and A&M kind of being that second tier that's pretty close. And the third tier is probably Auburn and maybe Tennessee are those tiers. But I would tell you this, and I've told people this for a couple of weeks now, and even leading into before this pandemic started, that I firmly believe that this is going to be the most wide-open SEC race we've had in maybe 2 decades. And now the fact that, we have this and there's no spring practice and everyone's kind of bunched together and we're all trying to figure it out together, I think this is going to be one of the wildest college football seasons we'll ever see.
Now, we're talking to Peter Burns, ESPN SEC Network studio anchor. Peter, a couple of more questions before we let you go. Number one is, I know you're a golf fan.
Yeah.
Sunday you have a golf match going on between 4 guys we know all heard of: Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson, Tom Brady, and Peyton Manning. Is that something you might be watching?
Oh, hell yeah. Listen, like right now I'll watch anything, especially when it comes to live sporting events. But yeah, I'm extremely excited about it. And I think one of the reasons why is, the first one that Tiger and Phil had was just great. It was great drama. It was good to see those guys play a match together. But now you add Peyton Manning, who's fantastic at trash talking. You have Tom Brady, who, of course, is one of the best quarterbacks of all time as well, with their Peyton. And I think it's just going to be unique. I think we're going to see more of this. And I think going back to, what you and I talked about earlier about being creative, I think we're going to start seeing after this broadcasting change in the fact that we are going to mic up a lot more players. We are going to get a lot more access. We are going to do things in which we've never really done quite before. And to see those guys mic'd up is going to be awesome because, I talked to Chris DeMarco, who's a former Florida Gator golfer. He's been playing a lot of golf with Peyton Manning out in Denver, and he says, hey, man, Peyton's out there grinding like he's playing in the Super Bowl, so I'm curious to see how that plays, and I'm taking Peyton. I'm taking Peyton and Tiger in that match to say the least.
Well, so am I, and the funny thing about that you had just mentioned, and you understand it, but a lot of the fans don't realize. Obviously Phil and Tiger, they're professional golf players, but someone like Manning and Brady, their competitive nature takes over in something like this, and they really want to win, don't they?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. It's no matter the sport, take these guys being competitors on football. It doesn't matter. Like, the reason why they're so good is they're so competitive. And so I look at it and I'm like, all right, one or two things is going to happen. Like I think there'll be fun in games a little bit. But I think when they get in there, I think the first couple of holes is going to be like this nervous energy. They're both trying to pry each other's eyeballs out. Then I think in the middle part of the round, they'll be having a little bit more fun. But the last 4 or 5 holes, those guys are competitive at tiddlywinks and checkers. So you don't become as good as you are without being that competitive. So I cannot wait. I do a Sunday morning ESPN radio show, and I think I'm going to spend a whole 3 hours just talking about it.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing that show. I want to thank you so much, Peter, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today on Frankly Speaking Sports.
Man, look forward to doing it, and hopefully next time we're breaking down football for, in big games this fall.
Sounds great to me. Stay safe, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
That was the great Peter Burns, ESPN, SEC Network, studio anchor. We'll be back right after this. Want to remind you, if you enjoyed that interview, all of our interviews are currently on our YouTube channel at Frankly Speaking Sports. Make sure you go ahead, you subscribe to our sports channel. There is no charge. It is completely free. It's Frankly Speaking Sports on YouTube. And as always, we always play our podcasts, and we always go ahead and put these interviews on our Facebook sports page. If you guys have friends who are not currently members of the Frankly Speaking Sports page, go ahead. Have them join. We'll go ahead and approve them. And we want to also let you know that we are going to continue to try to get as many more guests as possible so that we can keep playing these interviews for you. Next week, we are booked solid. We have people Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. Great guests from all over the sports world. So make sure you stay tuned and everybody stay safe.